I'm gonna do something I've never done before today, and I'm a little embarrassed to admit I've never done it because I feel like every gardener except for me has planted bulbs before. I don't know why I've ignored bulbs for my entire gardening life. We're fixing that now. So I did order a bunch of flowering bulbs for spring so that we can have kind of a flush of blooms every few weeks for all of spring. And I'm going to show you how I do the lasagna layering method and the kind of planting recipes that I'm using. But first, let's unbox my order and I'll show you what I got. It always feels like Christmas whenever I get a box of bulbs or whatever I bought, like for plants. I did already open some of these because I'm impatient and I was doing a short form video for Instagram. We have 3 containers that we're gonna fill today. They're all terracotta, and I picked terracotta for this project on purpose because from what I've read, bulbs like their soil to be a little bit drier. Like, we don't want them to rot. So with the terracotta, it will keep the soil a little bit drier, and hopefully we won't have any issues with rotting bulbs. Plus, I just think terracotta is so pretty. So any excuse that I can find to use it, I will. I would really like to do 5 containers because I've got 5 containers of fall stuff right now in front of the greenhouse, and I just think it's like the perfect amount of planters. So if I were to move these outside next spring, I would want to have 5. So we're gonna see, maybe I can kind of scrounge up some smaller ones that we could use as well. I thought I was getting like so many bulbs, and I really didn't get like all that many. Like when the box came in, I was really surprised at how little it was, but that's okay. We're gonna work with it. So I've got kind of 3 different tiers of bulbs. We've got our large size, our medium size, and our tinies. And that's because we're gonna be doing this lasagna layering method, and we're gonna have like the biggest ones on the bottom and then work our way up. But I'm not gonna show these to you in any particular order. I'm just grabbing stuff. Okay, so these are actually one of our, if not our largest bulb that we're planting, which is weird because they're so tiny, but the plants themselves are really, really tall. This is a drumstick allium. I'm so excited to do alliums. I've had leeks, of course, and chives and garlic grass and all of that, but this is a drumstick allium, so they'll get really big and have these kind of purple like umbrellas on them. This variety gets 22 to 28 inches tall, so it's a really tall one. It only needs to be planted about 3 to 4 inches deep and 2 to 4 inches apart. I'm curious if they actually smell like onions. I don't really smell it. I don't want to break it to check, but that's pretty cute, right? So little, and yet they're gonna be so tall. These are the graceful elegant tulips. Couldn't tell you what they look like because I kind of just blacked out and ordered a bunch of different things. These get about 18 to 24 inches tall. You want to plant them between 6 and 8 inches deep and about 4 to 6 inches apart. But these are definitely on the larger side. Your tulips, of course, they're going to be a bit bigger. I want to say that this mix was like pinks and purples and whites, but I might be making that up. This is a lucili mix. I want to say this is Glory of the Snow. It's a smaller one, I know that. It's going to be an early spring variety and grow about 5 inches tall. This one I already like mostly planted them because it only came with a few. But these are hyacinths. I cannot believe how big these are. I did not think that hyacinths could get this big. These will get 8 to 12 inches tall. You want to plant them about 6 to 8 inches deep and 4 to 6 inches apart. So they're a big bulb. They're really big, and they've got this beautiful purple skin on them. This was 5 bulbs, and I believe it was like a mix, like it was a combination of different colors. This is the Funky Blue Trumpets blend. These get 6 to 8 inches tall, and the instruction says planting depth and spacing varies. So I don't really know what that means. If it means it's flexible, I guess, but they're smaller bulbs, so I'm gonna plant them closer to the top. I got one more bag of tulips. I don't honestly love tulips. I really like parrot tulips, like tulips that have texture and that are just a little bit different. And if you don't know already, tulips are actually totally edible, and different colors and varieties have different flavors. So we're gonna be taste testing these next spring. But this is a mixed triumph tulip. They get about 14 to 20 inches tall. And this is the only one I've seen where the planting depth was less than the plant spacing. So they're saying 4 to 6 inches deep, but 6 to 8 inches apart. And last but not least, these are probably one of my favorite spring flowers. I think just because they're the first ones that I see every year that tell me like spring is really, really here. And that's a mixed crocus. So I did get one with multiple colors in it. And these are your standard crocus. So they're gonna be about 3 to 6 inches tall, 2 to 3 inches deep, 2 to 3 inches apart. All right, I'm gonna grab my containers and everything that I need, and then we'll talk about watering and fertilizing while I plant. Okay, so you know how I said that I was only gonna plant a few containers, and I wasn't even sure that I had enough containers to plant how much I wanted to plant. Well, consider this your subtle foreshadowing, because I definitely underestimated how far this little box of bulbs was going to go, and you're gonna see that it haunts me. It still haunts me, and I didn't even get through all of them. So if you haven't heard of this layering kind of lasagna bulb method, I'm going to explain it really quick. But basically, it's really simple. All we're doing is we're trying to make it so that we have continuous blooms throughout the whole spring, because obviously there's not very much going on in the spring. It can be very sad and depressing because everything's cold and gray and wet still, and you're just desperately waiting for the first crocus to appear. Please tell me it's not just me. So instead of desperately waiting, you can do this lasagna method instead, because bulbs kind of fall into 3 categories. There's the bulbs that bloom really early, the bulbs that bloom mid-spring, and the bulbs that bloom toward the end of spring. And coincidentally, or maybe not, I don't know, but basically the size of the bulb and how deep it's planted correlates to when it is going to bloom. So our smaller bulbs go at the top and they bloom first, and then once those are done, they're done, so it makes room for the second set of bulbs to come up. And I think you can even do, like, you could get really specific with this, and you could have like multiple sets of the medium bulbs that bloom in the mid-spring and multiple sets of the late blooming larger bulbs in the bottom if you had a really, really big container, which I thought I had a really, really big deep container, but I guess I was super wrong about that. We'll see. This particular container had some lettuce in it that I had just kind of thrown lettuce and I think it was coleus in this for like a fall arrangement by the greenhouse doors, and something ate it. So whenever you're like, why are pests not eating her plants? It's because they're 3 feet off the ground. Anytime I put something on the ground that a rabbit would want to eat, they're gonna eat it. So I lost that lettuce, and that's okay because it meant we could use this container. And this particular container I really like for bulbs because it is shallow. If you're gonna do bulbs, I think either doing a really, really deep one, so you can do multiple layers of that lasagna method, or a really, really shallow one is gonna look the best, but that's just my personal opinion. I mean, do whatever works best for you. I am clearly not an expert. I've never done bulbs before like this. But the benefit of layering it this way is obviously just that you get a much wider variety of flowers throughout the entire spring, which is really nice. Real quick before I forget, this is one of the new shirts from the merch line that we're releasing for the winter. It should be popping up here on your screen now so you can grab one. It's a message that means a lot to me, that's really important to what we're doing here, talking about accessible gardening and how gardening is for everyone. It just says the pause is as important as the project. I think this will probably resonate for a lot of you. I know it resonates for me. Buying the merch designs does allow us to continue to make these free videos for you and give you lots of free educational content. There is a reason that I haven't planted flowering bulbs like this before, and it's partially because I'm not a flower farmer, I'm not a flower gardener. Flowers, I love them. I love to have beneficial ones in my garden that attract pollinators and such, but they're not my priority. Like, I grow a garden for the food mostly, but also they are so expensive. So expensive. Like, I love vegetable gardening because you can buy a pack of seeds for $3 and then you can save those seeds and never buy them again. But there's just something about, like, it feels bougie. This is also why I don't grow dahlias, to be honest. And I never will grow dahlias, I think, because as much as I think they're beautiful, the cost is just outrageous to me. And I'm not a collector that way. Like, it's just not my thing. Not to yuck anyone's yum if it's your thing, but for me, the cost is just not justifiable. Like, it's just not what I want to be spending my money on. However, I'm making this exception because I've had a goal to prioritize extending my season more and more. And Flowering bulbs are a really great way to do that because they come up so early in the spring. And even though like the majority of what I'm planting for flowering bulbs is not edible the way that the tulips are, it's still just, it's going to be really nice. It's going to be nice to have fresh new things growing so early in the season and extend that season further, because I live in a 4-season climate. This is something I feel like is not addressed enough on YouTube, especially. Like there's not that many 4-season growers talking about how to grow all year round, and flowering bulbs are an important way to do that. So that's why I decided this year to showcase flowering bulbs so that you guys could maybe get inspiration from it and do some of your own. It's not too late right now. I'm recording this on October 22nd in Zone 6B, and you can plant your flowering bulbs now. You basically want to get them in the ground before there's a hard freeze so that it has a chance to develop a root system but not sprout. So you do want to do it later in the season, which is why like I'm not doing this in September, I'm doing it in October. And generally when you order the bulbs online, the nursery won't send them out to you until it is the right time to plant for your zone, which is really nice. So you know, like once the box comes in, it's safe to plant them. But it's a good idea to get them in, I would say, anytime from like mid-October to very early November here in Zone 6, probably similar in similar zones. And I'm just using a Coast of Maine potting soil here. You guys know I love Coast of Maine. They're the best, and their potting soil is so multi-purpose. I use it in my vegetable gardens as well. But we really, with bulbs, our goal is to kind of keep them consistently moist, but not so damp that the bulbs can rot over the winter. And so this comes into play with watering as well, which I'll talk about in a second. But that's a big reason why it's so important to have a very high quality potting soil mix to use for your bulbs. You also don't want something that's like super acidic. Like you wouldn't want something that's meant for blueberries. Don't use blueberry soil for your bulbs. But a general purpose potting soil like this is going to work really well, and this one's super high quality and organic, so it's going to work even better. So at this point we're filling up the really big container that I had, and I actually already filled one for that short form Instagram video that I was talking about earlier. So those are my 2 big containers, and then we have that really shallow one. And this is about the point where I started to realize like, oh no, like I have barely made a dent in these bulbs and I'm out of soil in this bag. So I ended up like salvaging some soil that I had like just from other planters that I've been like pulling stuff out of. And my brain is like starting to spin because I'm like thinking, where am I going to find more containers that I can plant in right now that I'm okay with like not being able to use for anything else for the entirety of winter and spring? Because now we're talking about a container that's just going to sit here and not have anything flowering in it for months and months and months. So I did manage to scrounge some more planters, which we'll see in a second. But it was touch and go there for a minute, guys. Like I was not sure what was going to happen, and I kept like putting more bulbs in and thinking like, no, this is too close. Like I can't do more. And yeah, we did the best we could. Like I was amazed at how far these bulbs went, and I guess I was wrong. You get more than you think you get with what you pay for bulbs, if that makes sense. But yeah, this is me just like panicking and thinking, where are the rest of those planters that I had? So I had some like under this potting bench, which it's a disaster. Don't even look. It's so messy. But then I remembered the ones on the deck. So I grabbed those planters instead, and we're going to use those. Even though they're really small, I won't be able to do any of the bigger bulbs in them. I'll still be able to use up a bunch. two other things when you're doing this lasagna layering method that you need to keep in mind. So obviously we need to keep in mind the layering. We need to put our bigger bulbs at the bottom. We need to make sure we're putting the right depth of soil over those bulbs before we put in our next layer. We need to be using a lower acidity, high quality potting soil, and that's going to have some fertilizer in it. I don't want you to fertilize this right now, because if we fertilize this now, it has the potential to accidentally jumpstart those bulbs. And while we do want them to put on roots right now, we do not want them to put on any leafy growth, because it will just kind of fry off as soon as it gets cold. So if we fertilize it now, that's not going to help us. We want to wait until spring to fertilize it. Of course, I have the luxury of being able to tuck these into the greenhouse, so I don't really have to worry about like squirrels or other rodents kind of burrowing in here and finding a sweet little snack for themselves. So if you are storing them outside, you want to do it somewhere where they're protected. You can maybe put a piece of mesh screen over them or something like that so that they can't dig in it. And I am going to water these just one time just to kind of give them that boost so that they can get those roots going, but I probably won't water them again. Like, you want to keep the soil from going hydrophobic, but you don't want to give them like a big heavy drink throughout the winter, because that could just lead to the bulbs rotting, and we don't want that. If you can store them in a shed that has like just a little bit of sunlight, like that's probably ideal, even if you don't have a greenhouse, because we don't want them like freezing solid in the container. If you're gonna do like bulbs outside, I would actually more likely encourage you to just plant them straight in the ground instead, especially in a colder zone, because they're just going to be better insulated that way from like hard freezes. Of course, it's a little bit trickier to keep the squirrels and such away from them, but it's so pretty. It's so pretty when you can get like all those bulbs in there. But I'm curious to know what bulbs you're considering planting, or if you have any favorites, because obviously I'm very new to this. I went with kind of like the safest options that I was already semi-familiar with, at least by name, but maybe next year I'll try to do something a little different. So if you have any suggestions, let me know down in the comments. All right, friends, that's it for today. Thank you so much for gardening with me. Make sure you hit like and subscribe so you don't miss any future videos. And let me know in the comments down below if you have any questions. See you next time.